That's your daughter's backpack, Gigiora said, holding up the faded purple fabric like it was nothing. My knees buckled. 15 years. 15 years since Leilea disappeared. I was standing in my sister's basement on a Saturday afternoon, helping her sort through boxes before she moved to Arizona. The fluorescent light overhead hummed its lonely song. Dust particles floated through the air like ghosts. Gigiora pulled the backpack from a plastic bin, and my entire body went rigid. The purple fabric had a small tear on the left side. I knew that tear. I'd sewn it once when Leilea was 14, sitting at my kitchen table with needle and thread, complaining about how the school didn't care about students' belongings. "Where did you get this?" My voice came out as a whisper. Gigiora's face shifted. Something flickered across her features. Guilt, maybe, or calculation. She set the backpack down slowly on a cardboard box. Her hands trembled slightly. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "I found it years ago," she said quietly. "I didn't know what to do with it. Didn't know what to do with it. My daughter's backpack. The backpack I'd searched for frantically when Leilea vanished on her way home from school. The backpack that police had asked about in their initial investigation. The backpack that had never been found. I stepped toward her. The basement suddenly felt too small, the air too thick to breathe. My sister, my own sister, had this the entire time and said nothing. Not one word in 15 years. "Open it," I demanded. Gigiora's hands shook as she unzipped the main compartment. Inside was Leilea's calculus textbook, her name written in her careful handwriting on the cover, her blue pen, her notebook filled with her notes, her student ID card clipped to a lanyard. Everything frozen in time from the day she disappeared. October 23rd, a Tuesday. The day that split my life into before and after. But there was something else. A folded piece of paper tucked into the front pocket. I reached for it with fingers that felt numb and detached from my body. The paper was cream-colored, expensive-looking. My hands shook as I unfolded it. It was a photograph. Leilea stood in front of a cabin somewhere, smiling at the camera. She looked older than 14. Maybe 16 or 17. She was wearing clothes I'd never seen before. Her hair was longer. She looked healthy, happy even. On the back, written in handwriting I didn't recognize. "Don't look for her. She's safe. That's all you need to know." The room tilted. I had to grip the edge of the box to stay upright. "Gigiora," I said, and my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else entirely. "What is this? What did you do?" My sister's face crumpled. She sank onto a plastic storage bin, her head in her hands. The basement was silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights and the sound of my own breathing, which had become shallow and rapid. "I didn't take her," Gigiora said finally, her voice muffled. "I need you to understand that first. I didn't take Leilea." "Then how did you get her backpack? How did you get this photograph?" Gigiora looked up at me, and I saw tears streaming down her face. "Because Leilea came to me. She came to my house the day she disappeared, and she asked me to help her run away." The words hit me like a physical blow. I had to sit down. There was another plastic bin nearby, and I lowered myself onto it, still holding the photograph and the note. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep hold of the paper. "She what?" The words came out as barely more than a breath. "She said she couldn't take it anymore," Gigiora continued, her voice breaking. "She said living with you was suffocating her, that you had too many rules, that you didn't understand her, that she felt trapped. She said she'd been planning it for months. She asked if she could leave her backpack at my house, if I could help her disappear for a few days so you'd get scared, so you'd realize how much she meant to you, And then she'd come back, and everything would be different. I couldn't process what I was hearing. Lilia had been happy. She had good grades. She had friends. We had dinner together most nights. We talked. Or at least, I thought we talked. I thought I knew my daughter. Why didn't you tell me? The question came out as a whisper. Why didn't you call me? Why did you let me suffer for 15 years? Gigiora's face twisted with anguish. Because she made me promise. She was so serious about it. She said if I told you, if I ruined her plan, she would never forgive me. She said she'd disappear anyway, but this time for real, and it would be my fault. I stood up abruptly, the photograph and note falling to the concrete floor. You let me think my daughter was dead. You let me search for her. You let me go to the police. You let me spend thousands of dollars on private investigators. You let me fall apart, and you said nothing. For 15 years. I tried to tell you, Gigiora said, standing up now too. I wanted to tell you so many times, but I didn't know how. Every year that passed made it worse. I didn't know if Lilia was even alive anymore. I didn't know where she was. I only knew that she'd asked me to keep her secret, and I'd promised. You promised my daughter over me? My voice was rising now, echoing off the concrete walls. I'm your sister. I raised you when Mom was sick. I helped you through your divorce. I've been there for you my entire life. And I know that, Gigiora said, tears streaming down her face. I know that, and I hate myself for it. But Lilia was just a kid. She was scared and desperate, and she trusted me. I looked at the backpack, the textbook, the photograph. My daughter at 16 or 17, looking happy and healthy and alive. Alive. She was alive. The realization hit me with such force that I had to grab onto the shelving unit to steady myself. Lilia was alive, but she had chosen to disappear. She had chosen to leave me, and my sister had helped her do it and kept the secret for 15 years. I picked up the photograph and stared at it. The cabin behind Lilia looked like it was somewhere in the mountains. There were pine trees visible in the background. The photograph had no date on it, no location information. Just those words on the back. Don't look for her. She's safe. Do you know where she is? I asked, my voice steady now, dangerously so. Gigiora shook her head. No, she never told me. She said the less I knew, the better. She said if you ever found out, you couldn't force me to tell you if I genuinely didn't know. So, my daughter orchestrated her own disappearance and used you as her accomplice. Yes, Gigiora whispered. I looked at my sister, this woman I'd known my entire life, who had shared a bedroom with me growing up, who I'd thought I could trust completely. She was a stranger to me now. Everything I thought I knew about her had shifted. I need to leave, I said. Weta, please. I need to leave right now. I walked up the basement stairs, the photograph still clutched in my hand. Behind me, I could hear Gigiora calling my name, but I didn't stop. I walked through her house, out the front door, and to my car. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time without starting the engine, just staring at the photograph of my daughter. Lilia was alive. After 15 years of not knowing, of imagining every terrible possibility, of spending money I didn't have on private investigators, of having my DNA tested and added to missing persons databases, of attending support groups for parents of missing children, Lilia was alive, but she didn't want to be found. The realization was almost worse than thinking she was dead, because at least if she was dead, there was an ending. There was a reason she hadn't come back. But this was a choice. She had chosen to leave me. She had chosen to stay away. She had chosen to let me suffer. I started the car and drove home in a daze. The streets were familiar, the traffic normal, the world exactly as it had been that morning. But everything had changed. Everything. When I got home, I went straight to Lilea's room. I hadn't changed it in 15 years. Her bed was made with the same pink comforter she'd had as a teenager. Her posters were still on the walls, bands she'd loved, actors she'd had crushes on. Her desk was exactly as she'd left it, with her laptop closed and her textbooks stacked neatly. I'd kept this room as a kind of shrine, a way of keeping her alive in my mind. Now it felt like a monument to my own delusion. I sat on her bed and looked at the photograph again. The girl in the picture had my nose and my sister's eyes. She looked healthy and strong and happy. She looked like someone who had chosen her own path and was content with that choice. How could I not have known? How could I have missed the signs that my daughter was so unhappy she wanted to disappear? I thought back to the weeks before she vanished. Had she seemed withdrawn? I tried to remember. She'd been a normal teenager, sometimes moody, sometimes chatty, sometimes locked in her room. Wasn't that just being 14? I'd given her space. I'd let her have privacy. I'd trusted her. Maybe that had been my mistake. Maybe I should have pushed harder. Maybe I should have asked more questions. Or maybe, I thought bitterly, I should have been the kind of mother that my daughter wanted to stay with. I lay back on her bed, still holding the photograph, and I let myself cry for the first time since I'd found the backpack. I cried for the lost years. I cried for the daughter I thought I had. I cried for the future I'd imagined for her that would never happen now. And underneath all of that, I cried with relief because she was alive. The next morning, I didn't call Gigiora. I didn't call the police. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in 15 years. I tried to find my daughter. I took the photograph to a private investigator, someone different from the ones I'd hired before. His name was Riseo Tran, and he came highly recommended. I sat in his small office on a Tuesday morning, the same day of the week that Lilia had disappeared, and I told him everything. "The photograph is recent," he said, studying it carefully. "I'd say within the last 5 years. The quality of the print, the type of film used, this isn't old. Whoever took this picture took it recently." "How recent?" I asked. "Hard to say exactly, but the cabin in the background, I might be able to identify it. There are databases of rental properties, vacation homes, that sort of thing. If I can match the architecture and landscape, I might be able to narrow down the location." "Can you find her?" I asked, and I hated how desperate I sounded. Riseo set the photograph down and looked at me carefully. "I can try, but I need to ask you something first. If I find her, are you prepared for what that might mean? Your daughter chose to disappear. She chose to stay away. Finding her might not give you the reunion you're hoping for." "I know," I said, "but I need to try. I need to know that she's really alive. I need to know that she's okay." "Then I'll do my best," Riseo said. Over the next 2 weeks, Riseo worked on identifying the cabin. He sent me updates via email with photographs of similar cabins in different mountain regions. He compared the trees in the background of Lilia's photograph with vegetation patterns in different states. He traced the architectural style of the cabin to a specific builder who worked primarily in Colorado and New Mexico. "I'm getting close," he wrote in one email. "I've narrowed it down to about 50 cabins that match the description. I'm working on cross-referencing them with rental records and property ownership databases." While Riseo was doing his work, I did mine. I went through every photograph I had of Lilia. trying to see if there were any clues I'd missed. I looked at her school records, her grades, her attendance. Everything looked normal. She'd been a good student, well liked by her teachers, involved in a few clubs. Nothing suggested that she was desperately unhappy. I also started researching runaway teenagers. I read articles and studies about why kids leave home. The reasons were often more complex than I'd realized. Sometimes it wasn't about abuse or neglect. Sometimes it was about control, about feeling suffocated by parental expectations, about needing to find their own identity. Sometimes it was about mental health issues that parents didn't recognize. Sometimes it was simply about a teenager making a terrible decision that they couldn't take back. I wondered which category Lilia fell into. On the 15th day, Riseo called me. "I found her," he said without preamble. "Or at least, I found the cabin. It's in northern New Mexico, about 40 miles from Taos. It's owned by a couple named Paula Kennedy and Finnan Daniels. I ran their names through every database I have access to. No criminal records, no red flags. They rent the property out occasionally, but mostly they seem to live there full time." My heart was pounding. "Did you find any records of Lilia? Any evidence that she's there?" "Not yet, but I did find something interesting. Paula Kennedy has a daughter who would be about the right age. Her name is Lilia Kennedy. She's been attending the local high school in Taos for the past 14 years. The words hit me like a physical blow. Lilia Kennedy. My daughter had taken a new last name. She'd been going to school under a different identity. She'd built a completely new life. "Can you send me the address?" I asked. "Weta, I need to ask you something before I do. What's your plan here? Are you going to show up at her door? Are you going to call her? Are you going to try to bring her back?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "I just need to see her. I need to know that she's really okay." "Okay," Rikeo said. "But be prepared for the possibility that she might not want to see you. She's built a life there. She might have reasons for staying that you don't understand. She might have moved on in ways that are going to be hard for you to accept." "I understand," I said. He gave me the address. I didn't go immediately. Instead, I spent 3 days preparing myself mentally for what I might find. I imagined different scenarios. Maybe Lilia would be happy to see me. Maybe she'd slam the door in my face. Maybe she'd call the police. Maybe she'd already moved on to somewhere else, and the information Riseo had found was outdated. I also called Gigiora. "I found her," I said when she answered. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "You found Lilia?" "I know where she is, in New Mexico. She's been there the whole time, living under a new name, going to school, building a life." Gigiora started crying. "Is she okay? Is she alive and healthy?" "I don't know yet. I haven't seen her, but I'm going to drive out there." "Weta, I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. I know I have no right to ask this, but please let me know if she's okay. Please tell her that I never wanted to hurt you. Tell her that I've regretted my decision every single day for the past 15 years. I hung up without responding. I left for New Mexico the next morning. It was a long drive, 22 hours from where I lived in Kansas. I drove straight through, stopping only for gas and coffee. The entire time, my mind was racing. What was I going to say to my daughter? How was she going to react to seeing me after 15 years? Had she thought about me at all during that time? Or had she successfully erased me from her life? The cabin was about 40 miles north of Taos, nestled in the mountains on a private road. I drove slowly, checking the address twice to make sure I was in the right place. The cabin was beautiful, a modern structure with large windows and a deck that overlooked a valley. There was a car parked in the driveway, a silver sedan that looked relatively new. I sat in my car for a long time, my hands gripping the steering wheel. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might burst out of my chest. This was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for 15 years. I got out of the car and walked to the front door. My legs felt weak. My hands were shaking. I knocked. There was a long pause. Then the door opened, and I saw my daughter for the first time in 15 years. She looked like a woman now, not a girl. She was tall and strong-looking, with long dark hair that fell past her shoulders. She had my nose and my sister's eyes, just like in the photograph. But her face was harder than I remembered, more guarded. She stared at me for a long moment without saying anything. "Hello, Lilaya?" I said, my voice trembling. She didn't move. She didn't smile. She didn't invite me in. She just stood there, looking at me like I was a stranger. "How did you find me?" she asked finally. "A private investigator. I found your backpack. Your aunt had it. She told me what happened." Lilaya's expression hardened further. "She had no right to tell you anything." "She had every right," I said, and now my voice was steadier, stronger. "I'm your mother. I spent 15 years not knowing if you were alive or dead. I deserve to know what happened." "You deserve?" Lilaya's laugh was bitter. "You don't deserve anything. You gave up that right when you decided to control every aspect of my life." "I never controlled you," I said. "I raised you. I loved you." "You loved the idea of me," Lilaya said coldly. "You loved having a daughter who got good grades and went to bed on time and didn't ask too many questions. You loved the version of me that fit into your life without causing any trouble. But you didn't love me, the real me, the me that had thoughts and feelings and needs that didn't revolve around making you happy." I felt tears starting to form in my eyes. "That's not fair." "Fair?" Lilaya's voice rose. "You want to talk about fair? Do you have any idea what it was like growing up with you? Do you have any idea how suffocating it was? You questioned everything I did. You monitored my friendships. You made me feel like I was never good enough. You made me feel like I was a burden." "I never made you feel like a burden," I said, my voice breaking. "I loved you so much. Then why didn't you ever ask me what I wanted? Why didn't you ever listen to what I was saying? I tried to tell you that I was unhappy. I tried so many times. But you never heard me. You just kept pushing me toward your version of what my life should be." "I was trying to protect you," I said. "I was trying to keep you safe." "By controlling me? By not letting me make my own decisions? By treating me like I was incapable of thinking for myself?" Lilaya shook her head. "I was 14 years old, and I felt like I was suffocating. I felt like I was going to explode if I had to spend one more day living under your rules. So I left, and you know what? It was the best decision I ever made." "You could have told me," I said desperately. "You could have talked to me about how you were feeling. We could have worked it out together." "No, we couldn't have," Lilaia said flatly. "Because you don't listen. You never have. You just tell people what they should think and how they should feel, and you expect them to fall in line." I felt like she'd slapped me. "Is that what you think of me?" "That's what I know of you," Lilaia said. She started to close the door. "I'm glad you found me. I'm glad you know I'm alive. But I don't want you in my life. I built a good life here. I'm happy. And I don't need you ruining that." "Wait," I said, putting my hand up. "Please, just give me 5 minutes. Let me explain." There's nothing to explain, Lileya said. You should go. The door closed in my face. I stood there on the porch, staring at the closed door, unable to move. My daughter had just told me that she didn't want me in her life. She'd told me that I was controlling and suffocating, and that she was better off without me. And the worst part was, I wasn't sure she was wrong. I walked back to my car in a daze. I sat in the driver's seat and let myself cry. I cried for the lost years. I cried for the daughter I'd thought I had. I cried for the mother I'd thought I was. I cried because the truth was so much more complicated and painful than I'd ever imagined. After a while, I started the car and drove back down the mountain. I didn't go back to Kansas immediately. Instead, I found a small hotel in Taos and checked in for the night. I needed time to process what had just happened. I needed time to think about what Lileya had said and whether any of it was true. That night, I went through my memories of Lileya's childhood, looking at them with new eyes. I thought about the times I'd said no to her requests. I thought about the rules I'd set. I thought about the times I'd corrected her or pushed her toward activities I thought were good for her. Had I been controlling? Or had I just been a normal parent trying to raise a responsible child? I didn't know anymore. The next morning, I drove back to the cabin. I parked on the road this time, not in the driveway. I sat and watched the cabin for hours, hoping to catch a glimpse of my daughter. Around noon, the front door opened and Lileya came out. She was carrying a backpack and wearing hiking boots. She didn't see my car as she walked toward a trailhead that led into the mountains. I waited until she was out of sight, then I got out of my car and approached the cabin. The front door was locked, but there was a window on the side that I could see through. Inside, I could see a living room with comfortable-looking furniture. There were photographs on the wall. Lileya at various ages, always smiling, always looking happy. There were photographs of her with other people too. A woman who looked to be in her 50s, a man about the same age, and various other people who I assumed were friends. Lileya had built a life here. She had people who loved her. She was happy. The realization should have made me feel better. My daughter wasn't suffering. She wasn't in danger. She was living a good life. But instead, I felt a deep sense of loss. She'd built this life without me. She'd grown up without me. She'd become a woman I didn't know. I sat on the porch steps and tried to figure out what to do next. Lileya had made it clear that she didn't want me in her life. I could respect that. I could drive back to Kansas and try to move forward. I could accept that my daughter was alive and safe and happy, even if she didn't want me to be part of that happiness. But I also couldn't let things end like this. I couldn't let her last words to me be an accusation that I was a controlling, suffocating mother. I needed her to know that I understood. I needed her to know that I was sorry. I pulled out my phone and I wrote her a letter. I wrote it in the Notes app, word after word, trying to capture everything I was feeling. I wrote about the day she disappeared and how terrified I'd been. I wrote about the years of not knowing whether she was alive or dead. I wrote about finding her backpack and the shock of learning that she'd chosen to leave. I wrote about driving to New Mexico and seeing her for the first time in 15 years. And I wrote about what she'd said to me and how I was beginning to understand that maybe she was right. I wrote, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for being the kind of mother that made you feel like you had to run away. I'm sorry for not listening to you when you tried to tell me you were unhappy. I'm sorry for controlling your life instead of letting you live it. I'm sorry for all of it. You deserved better than that. You deserved a mother who understood you and supported you and let you be yourself. I'm sorry I wasn't that mother, but I want you to know that I love you. I've loved you every single day for the past 15 years, even when I didn't know if you were alive. I love you now, and I'm proud of the woman you've become. I'm proud that you were strong enough to leave. I'm proud that you built a life for yourself. I'm proud of you. I printed out the letter at the hotel, and I drove back to the cabin. Lilia was still out on her hike. I left the letter in her mailbox, and then I drove away. I didn't wait to see if she would respond. I drove back to Kansas, and I tried to move on with my life. 2 weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. It was postmarked from Taos. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a short note in handwriting that I recognized as Lilia's. Thank you for the letter. I'm not ready to have you in my life yet, but maybe someday. I need more time. I need to process things. I'm glad you understand now. That helps. It doesn't fix everything, but it helps. I'll be in touch when I'm ready. Love, Lilia. I read the letter so many times that the paper started to wear thin. She wasn't ready to have me in her life yet, but maybe someday. That was enough. That was hope. I also had to deal with the fallout from what I'd discovered. The police wanted to know why I hadn't reported finding Lilia immediately. I had to explain that she was an adult now, that she'd left of her own volition, that she didn't want to be found. They accepted that, though not without some skepticism. I also had to confront Gigiora. I called her a week after I got back from New Mexico. She's alive, I said. She's happy. She's built a good life for herself. I'm so glad, Gigiora said, and I could hear tears in her voice. I'm so incredibly glad. But she's not ready to forgive me yet, I continued. And I'm not sure I'm ready to forgive you either. What you did, keeping that secret for 15 years, that was wrong. I understand why you did it, but it was still wrong. I know, Gigiora said quietly. I've known that for years. I've wanted to tell you so many times, but I was afraid. I was afraid of what it would mean. I was afraid of losing you. And instead, you lost me anyway, I said. You lost me the moment you decided that Lilia's secret was more important than my need to know. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said. Not yet, maybe not ever. But I want you to know that I'm trying. I'm trying to understand why you made the choice you made. I'm trying to see it from your perspective. And I'm trying to move forward. That's all I can ask for, Gigiora said softly. I hung up, and I didn't contact her again for several months. Instead, I spent that time reflecting on my life and my relationship with my daughter. I went to therapy. I read books about parenting and family dynamics. I tried to understand where I had gone wrong and what I could do differently if Lilia ever gave me the chance to be part of her life again. I also started writing. I wrote about my experience of losing my daughter and finding her again. I wrote about the pain and the confusion and the slow process of understanding that maybe Lilia had been right all along. I wrote about how it felt to realize that the version of myself I'd held onto for so long, the version of myself as a good mother who was just trying to protect her child, might not have been the whole truth. 6 months after I got Lilia's letter, I received another one. This one was longer. She wrote about her life in New Mexico. She wrote about the people who had taken her in, Paula and Finan, who had become like parents to her. She wrote about going to college and studying environmental science. She wrote about her friends and her job and the life she'd built. And at the end, she wrote, I think I'm ready to talk to you now. Not in person yet, But maybe we could start with phone calls. I want to understand you better. I want to understand why you were the way you were. I want to see if we can build a relationship that's different from what we had before. I'm not promising anything, but I'm willing to try. I called her that same day. We talked for 3 hours. We didn't solve everything. We didn't heal all the wounds. But we started to talk about what had happened and why. We started to understand each other better. And for the first time in 15 years, I felt like there was a path forward. It took another year before Lilia agreed to see me in person again. We met in Albuquerque, halfway between where she lived and where I lived. We had dinner at a restaurant, and we talked about her life, and my life, and the space between us that we were slowly trying to bridge. She told me about why she'd left. She told me about the panic attacks she'd had as a teenager, about the feeling of suffocation, about the way my rules and my expectations had made her feel like she couldn't breathe. She told me that she'd needed to get away to figure out who she was without me telling her who she should be. I listened, and I didn't interrupt, and I didn't defend myself. I just listened. And when she was done, I told her that I understood. I told her that I was sorry. I told her that I was proud of her for being strong enough to do what she needed to do. I'm not saying you were a bad mother, Lilia said carefully. You did a lot of things right. You provided for me. You made sure I was safe. You loved me. But you also couldn't let me be myself. You couldn't accept that I was a person with my own thoughts and feelings. You tried to shape me into something I wasn't. I know, I said, and I'm sorry for that. I can't change the past. But I can try to be different going forward, if you'll let me. Lilia reached across the table and took my hand. I'd like that. We didn't become best friends overnight. We didn't erase the 15 years of separation. But we started to build something new. We started to have phone calls that weren't awkward. We started to share things about our lives. We started to know each other as adults instead of as mother and daughter locked in a power struggle. 2 years after I found her backpack in my sister's basement, Lilia invited me to visit her in New Mexico. I spent a week at the cabin, and I met Paula and Finan properly. I learned that they had found Lilia hitchhiking on the road that day 15 years ago, looking scared and desperate. They'd taken her in, given her shelter, helped her enroll in school under an assumed name. They'd become the parents that Lilia needed at that time in her life. I didn't resent them for that. I was grateful to them. They had kept my daughter safe when I couldn't. On my last day there, Lilia took me on a hike to a vista point that overlooked the valley where the cabin was located. We stood together, looking out at the mountains and the sky, and Lilia said, "I'm glad you found me. I'm glad we're trying to fix things." "Me too," I said. "I'm sorry it took so long." "It took as long as it needed to," Lilia said. "I wasn't ready before. I needed time to become myself. I needed time to forgive you. And I needed time to understand that you were doing the best you could with what you knew." "Was I?" I asked. "Was I really doing the best I could? Or was I just being selfish and controlling?" "Probably both," Lilia said with a small smile. "But that's okay. People are complicated. Mothers are complicated. You were doing what you thought was right, even if it wasn't actually right. That's human." We drove back to Kansas together, and Lilia stayed with me for a week. We cooked meals together. We went to the movies. We had long conversations about everything and nothing. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension. Still moments where I could feel the ghost of our old dynamic trying to reassert itself. But we were trying. We were both trying. When Lilia left to go back to New Mexico, I drove her to the airport. As she was getting her bags out of the car, she hugged me and said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." "I could never give up on you," I said. "You're my daughter. You always will be." "I know," Lileya said. "And I'm glad for that. Even when I was angry at you, even when I didn't want anything to do with you, I was still glad that you existed. I'm still glad that you're my mother." I watched her walk through the airport doors, and I cried. But this time, the tears were different. They were tears of relief and gratitude and hope. My daughter was alive. She was happy. And we were finding our way back to each other. The path forward wouldn't be easy. There would be more conversations to have, more wounds to heal, more understanding to build. But for the first time in 15 years, I could see that path clearly, and I was ready to walk it. If you've lost someone you love, whether through death or distance or estrangement, don't give up on finding them or on finding peace with what happened. Hit follow if this hit close to home.